building, a rough building. I tell you, rather, nothing but every night there's robberies, forget about it. Nothing but robberies in my apartment building, you know?
Rodney Dangerfield's performance in Caddyshack, 1980, is one of the most talked about parts of the film, but there's a side to it that most fans completely missed. In this video, we break down what actually happened behind the scenes and what most viewers never noticed while watching. Join us as we uncover what really went on behind Rodney Dangerfield's unforgettable role in Caddyshack. A completely different idea. When Caddyshack was first being developed, it looked very different from the wild, unpredictable golf comedy people know today. The original idea was not focused on constant chaos or over-the-top characters. Instead, it started as a smaller, more grounded story centered on life inside a country club and the people who worked there. The main focus was meant to be a young caddy trying to understand his place in a world shaped by wealth, status, and strict social rules. In early script versions, the story leaned more toward working-class golf culture. The writers wanted to show what it was like for employees like caddies, groundskeepers, and staff members who served the members of an elite club. This version of the story had more structure and followed a clearer plot. It included character development, daily struggles, and a more traditional comedy style rather than random comedic moments. The original tone was also very different. The writers were aiming for a more controlled and structured comedy where jokes were carefully placed within the story. It was not designed to be improvised heavily. Scenes were written with specific dialogue and planned interactions. The humor came from situations and character behavior rather than spontaneous jokes or chaotic performances. As the project moved forward, things began to change. More writers and comedians became involved, and the script started to shift. Instead of sticking to a strict storyline, the team began allowing more freedom during filming. Actors were encouraged to experiment with dialogue and try different versions of their lines. This slowly turned the movie into a looser and more flexible production. Over time, the structured idea of a caddy-focused story faded. The film became less about one main character's journey and more about a collection of funny moments happening around a golf course. This change gave room for improvisation, which became a major part of the final movie. Scenes were often rewritten on set, and new jokes were added during filming instead of being planned in advance. A big reason for the original idea was the writers' own experiences at real golf clubs. They had spent time observing how these places worked, including the behavior of members and staff. These real-life experiences helped shape the early version of the script. They noticed strong class differences, strict rules, and unusual personalities, which inspired many of the characters and situations. However, instead of staying realistic, the movie gradually moved toward exaggeration and freeform comedy. What started as a grounded story about a caddy's world slowly transformed into a much more unpredictable film filled with improvisation and shifting ideas. The early version of Caddyshack shows how different a movie can become once creative freedom takes over during production. The next part looks at how the writers behind the film handled the pressure of turning this unusual idea into a full screenplay, written under pressure. The script for Caddyshack was written by Harold Ramis, Brian Doyle Murray, and Douglas Kenney, and at the time, they were all still relatively new when it came to writing a full feature film of this scale. Even though they were already known in comedy circles, this kind of production brought a different level of pressure and responsibility. They were working on a studio film with expectations, deadlines, and constant changes, which made the writing process very intense. None of the three writers had experience directing or fully shaping a film of this style from start to finish. They came from backgrounds in sketch comedy, improv, and smaller writing projects where flexibility was normal. But a feature film required structure, planning, and a clear storyline. This gap between experience and expectation created a lot of challenges during development. The studio also placed tight deadlines on the project. This meant the writers had to produce material quickly while still adjusting to feedback from producers, actors, and other crew members. Because of this pressure, the writing process never really stopped. Even while filming was happening, new jokes, dialogue, and scene changes were being written on the spot. This constant rewriting became a major part of how the movie was made. Instead of finishing a final script before shooting began, the story kept changing during production. Scenes were adjusted based on what was working on set, what actors suggested, and what felt funny in the moment. This created a flexible but unstable writing environment. Many scenes in Caddyshack were not fully scripted in the traditional sense. Instead of detailed dialogue, the writers often provided joke outlines. These outlines gave a basic idea of what needed to happen in a scene, but left space for actors to fill in the details. This meant that a lot of the final dialogue was created during filming rather than on paper. Because of the fast pace and constant revisions, the script never felt completely finished at any stage of production. It kept evolving until the very end of filming. This made the writing process both exciting and chaotic, with new ideas constantly replacing older ones. Even though this created challenges, it also gave the film its unique style. The looseness of the script allowed more freedom for comedy to develop naturally during production, instead of being strictly controlled on the page. The next part looks at how the film struggled without a clear main character and what that meant for the story. No lead character. One of the most unusual things about Caddyshack during production was that it did not really have a clear lead character. In most films, there is one main person whose story guides everything. That was not firmly set here. Instead, the movie shifted between several characters, and no single protagonist was fully locked in from start to finish. At different stages of development, the story tried to focus on different people. Danny Noonan, played by Michael O'Keefe, was meant to be one of the central characters. His storyline followed a young caddy trying to earn money for college and figure out his future. This gave the film a more traditional structure at first, where his journey could have acted as the main thread. At the same time, Ty Webb, played by Chevy Chase, also had a strong presence. His character was calm, mysterious, and often delivered short, unusual lines about golf and life. However, Ty Webb's scenes did not always connect directly to Danny's story in a clear way. They often felt separate, like their own small segments within the larger film. Then there was Al Chervik, played by Rodney Dangerfield. His character brought loud energy and constant disruption to the golf course. Every time he appeared, the tone of the film shifted. His scenes were so strong and memorable that they sometimes pulled attention away from the other storylines completely. Because of this, the film kept changing focus depending on who was on screen. This lack of a single main character created confusion during production. Even people working on the film were not always sure which storyline was meant to be the most important. Scenes were added, removed, or changed without a clear plan for how they would connect to a central plot. This made it difficult to maintain consistency. Actors also felt this uncertainty. In some cases, they were not fully sure whose story they were supporting in a given scene. Since the script was still evolving, the purpose of certain moments changed from day to day. A scene might start as part of Danny's story, but later be adjusted to highlight a different character instead. Because of this shifting focus, the final movie ended up feeling less like a single, continuous story and more like a collection of separate moments. Each character had their own space, but they did not always come together in a structured way. This is why the film has an episodic style, where scenes feel like individual sketches rather than parts of one tightly connected narrative. This unusual structure became one of the defining traits of the movie, even though it was not planned that way from the beginning. The next part looks at how Bill Murray's creativity on set changed some of the most memorable scenes in unexpected ways. Bill Murray writes, Bill Murray played a huge role in shaping one of the most memorable parts of Caddyshack, even though his character, Carl Spackler, was barely developed in the original script. At the start, Carl was not written as a major focus of the film. He was meant to be a small supporting character with limited screen time and simple dialogue. There was not much detail about his personality or his scenes. When Bill Murray arrived on set, he brought a very different approach. Instead of simply following the script, he came prepared with his own ideas for the character. He built Carl Spackler into a much more detailed and unusual personality. Murray added new lines, changed existing dialogue, and often created entire moments during filming without them being fully written beforehand. One of the most famous examples of this is Carl's obsession with the gopher on the golf course. In the original script, the gopher storyline was very small and not heavily developed, but Murray expanded it into long monologues where Carl talks directly to the imaginary target, explains strategies, and reacts emotionally to it. These moments were not fully planned in advance and grew naturally through improvisation. Many of Carl Spackler's most well-known lines came from these on-set changes. Instead of sticking to one fixed version of a scene, Murray would try different jokes and approaches in each take. This meant that scenes were often filmed multiple times, each with new dialogue or slightly different behavior. The goal was to see what worked best in the moment, rather than relying on a single written version. This method created a lot of variety in the footage. Editors later had to choose from several different versions of the same scene, each with different jokes and timing. It also meant that Carl's character developed more depth than originally planned, since so many different ideas were explored during filming. Murray's performance stood out because it felt unpredictable and natural. He did not treat the script as something fixed. Instead, he used it as a starting point and built on it during production. This approach gave Carl Spackler a unique voice that was very different from the other characters in the film. The next part looks at how an animatronic gopher became an unexpected character during filming. The gopher. One of the most unusual parts of Caddyshack production was how seriously the crew treated the animatronic gopher. Even though it was not a real animal or a human actor, it was handled like a full character on set. The gopher was not just a background prop. It became an important part of many scenes and required careful coordination to work properly on camera. The gopher was operated using animatronics, which meant it had mechanical parts controlled by technicians off camera. These operators had to move its head, eyes, mouth, and body at the right moments to match the action in each scene. Because of this, timing became very important. The crew had to give clear cues so that the gopher would react at the exact right moment during filming, just like a human performer would be directed. In many scenes, the gopher was treated as if it had its own presence in the story. Actors were instructed on when to look at it, react to it, or pause for its movements. This made it feel like the gopher was truly part of the scene, rather than just a special effect added later. The coordination between actors and operators had to be very precise to make the interaction believable. However, the gopher did not always cooperate easily. The animatronic system was complex and often unreliable. Because of technical issues, multiple versions of the gopher had to be built. Some versions were used for close-up shots, while others were designed for movement or specific actions. When one version failed or broke down, another had to be used or repaired quickly so filming could continue. These technical problems affected the production schedule. Scenes had to be paused, reset, or filmed again due to malfunctions. In some cases, the limitations of the gopher's movement forced the filmmakers to change how scenes were written or shot. If the gopher could not perform a certain action, the script was adjusted to fit what the machine could realistically do. As filming continued, the gopher's storyline slowly became more important than originally planned. In early drafts of the script, it was only a small part of the story. But because so much time and effort was spent making it work on screen, it naturally gained more attention. Scenes were expanded to include more interactions with the gopher, and it became a running part of the film's humor. By the end of production, the gopher had become a recognizable presence in the movie, even though it was never meant to be a major character. Its role grew not because of storytelling decisions alone, but because of the challenges and creativity involved in bringing it to life on set. The next part looks at how Rodney Dangerfield's character almost disappeared from the film before becoming a major highlight. Rodney Dangerfield's role in Caddyshack almost did not become what audiences remember today. At the start of production, his character, Al Chervik, was not planned as a central part of the movie. He was meant to be a smaller supporting character who would appear in a few scenes but would not have a major impact on the overall story. As filming went on, that changed. The creative team realized that Dangerfield brought a very different kind of energy compared to the rest of the cast. Because of this, his role was gradually expanded during production. More scenes were added for him, and existing scenes were adjusted so that Al Chervik could appear more often and have a bigger presence in the film. A large part of what made his character stand out was his improvisation. Many of his best-known lines were not fully written in the script. Instead, Dangerfield would come up with jokes on set and deliver them in his own style. The writers and director often allowed him to try different versions of a scene, which led to unexpected and fast-paced humor that was not originally planned. However, not everyone was immediately comfortable with his style. Studio executives had concerns about how over-the-top his performance was. His delivery was loud, fast, and very different from the more structured parts of the film. At first, there was uncertainty about whether this kind of comedy would fit into the movie's overall tone. Some worried it might feel too extreme compared to the rest of the story. Despite these concerns, his scenes continued to grow during production. Every time Al Chervik appeared on screen, the energy of the film shifted. His character brought chaos, confidence, and constant jokes that often disrupted the more traditional flow of the story. This made his presence very noticeable, even in small moments. As more footage was reviewed, it became clear that Dangerfield's performance was one of the most entertaining parts of the movie. His scenes had a strong impact on pacing because they broke away from the quieter or more structured moments in the film. This contrast made his appearances even more memorable. By the end of production, what was originally a minor role had turned into one of the standout performances in Caddyshack. His character became a key reason many scenes felt unpredictable and energetic. Even though he was not intended to be a central figure at first, his presence changed how the movie felt whenever he appeared. The next part looks at how constant improvisation on set caused major delays and reshaped entire scenes. Constant delays. One of the biggest challenges during the making of Caddyshack was how much improvisation took place on set. While improvisation helped create many funny and memorable moments, it also caused constant delays in production. Scenes rarely went exactly as planned, and this made filming slower and more complicated than expected. Many scenes took hours longer to complete than what was originally scheduled. A simple exchange between characters could turn into a long session of experimenting with different jokes and reactions. Instead of filming a scene once or twice and moving on, the cast would often try several versions before the director decided what worked best. This extended the shooting time far beyond normal expectations. Another issue was that actors frequently broke character because of ad-libbing. Since many cast members were making up lines on the spot, it was hard for others to stay serious. One unexpected joke could easily cause laughter on set, which meant scenes had to be restarted multiple times. This created a cycle where filming would begin, break down due to laughter or changes, and then restart again. Directors also had to deal with the challenge of shooting multiple versions of the same scene. Because there was no fixed script being followed strictly, they often had to capture different takes with different dialogue. A scene might be filmed one way with one set of jokes, then filmed again with completely different lines. The goal was to have enough material so that the best version could be chosen later during editing. Script supervisors faced their own difficulties during this process. Their job is usually to track dialogue, actions, and continuity between scenes. But with so much improvisation happening, it became very hard to keep everything consistent. Lines would change from one take to another, and blocking would shift depending on the direction of the improvisation. This made it difficult to track what version of a scene was supposed to be the final one. In post-production, editors also had to work through a large amount of footage that did not always follow a clear structure. Entire sequences were sometimes rebuilt using different takes because the improvised versions worked better than the original scripted scenes. This meant that editing was not just about cutting scenes together, but also about reshaping the story based on what was actually filmed. Even though this process created delays and confusion, it also contributed to the film's unique style. The constant improvisation gave Caddyshack a loose and unpredictable feel that would not have existed if everything had followed a strict script. The next part looks at how different acting styles among the cast created both conflict and unexpected comedy during filming. Very different acting styles. One of the most interesting things about Caddyshack during production was how different the cast members were in the way they approached acting. There was no single acting style across the set. Instead, there were two very different approaches happening at the same time, and they often did not match in a smooth way. Some actors, like Bill Murray and Rodney Dangerfield, came from strong improv comedy backgrounds. They were used to creating jokes in the moment, changing dialogue, and reacting freely to whatever was happening around them. For them, a script was more of a guide than a strict set of rules. They felt comfortable adjusting lines, adding humor, and trying new ideas during filming. On the other hand, other actors in the cast were trained in more traditional acting methods. They were used to following the script closely, memorizing dialogue exactly, and sticking to planned blocking and timing. For them, consistency and structure were very important. They expected scenes to follow a clear plan from start to finish. Because of this mix of styles, serious moments often turned unintentionally comedic. A scene that was supposed to feel calm or structured could suddenly change tone if someone added an unexpected joke or reaction. This shift did not always come from planning, but from how differently the actors approached their roles. At times, this caused confusion, but it also created unique moments that would not have happened in a more controlled environment. The energy on set was constantly changing, and no two takes felt exactly the same. This made filming both exciting and challenging for everyone involved. The directors eventually realized that trying to force everyone into one style would not work. Instead of controlling every moment strictly, they allowed more freedom on set. They accepted that the film would not follow a perfectly clean structure and decided to work with the unpredictable energy instead of against it. This decision shaped the final tone of Caddyshack. The mix of acting styles became part of what made the movie feel so different from other comedies. It was not perfectly balanced, but it was full of unexpected moments that came directly from the clash between structured acting and freeform comedy. The next part looks at how many of the film's most famous scenes were never fully written in the original script. Unscripted scenes take off. One of the most surprising things about Caddyshack is how many of its most famous scenes were not fully planned in the original script. A large part of what people remember from the movie was shaped during filming, not on paper. The script gave a basic structure, but many moments were changed, expanded, or created on set. A good example is the Baby Ruth pool scene. In the script, the idea was simple, but the final version became much more detailed and chaotic during production. The actors and crew adjusted the timing, reactions, and physical comedy while filming. Small changes added up, turning a basic idea into one of the most recognizable scenes in the movie. Much of the humor came from how the moment was played out on set rather than how it was originally written. Other parts of the film, like the golf course explosions and club chaos, were also expanded during production. These scenes did not always have detailed instructions in the script. Instead, they were built up as filming went on. If something worked well in a take, it was often repeated or increased in later shots. This meant that destruction, reactions, and background action were sometimes added spontaneously to make the scenes funnier or more energetic. Ty Webb's character, played by Chevy Chase, is another example of how improvisation shaped the film. His philosophical golf lines were not always fully written in advance. Many of his short, calm, and unusual comments were created during filming. He would often adjust dialogue to fit his style, which gave his character a very unique tone compared to the rest of the cast. These improvised lines became some of his most memorable moments. Supporting characters also benefited from this flexible approach. In several cases, minor characters were given extra screen time during filming because a scene felt like it needed more energy or humor. Instead of strictly following the script, the filmmakers allowed room for small additions that made certain characters more noticeable than originally planned. The next part looks at how the film's ending was repeatedly changed and reshot before the final version was locked in. The ending. The ending of Caddyshack went through a lot of changes before the final version made it to the screen. In fact, the final golf tournament sequence was reshot multiple times because the filmmakers were not fully satisfied with how the story was wrapping up. This was not a simple case of small edits. Entire sections of the ending were reworked and filmed again in different ways. At first, the original ending did not have a very clear or strong sense of resolution. The story had built up many different characters and plot threads, but the way they came together at the end was not fully settled. There were concerns about whether the conclusion felt complete or whether it left too many loose pieces without direction. Because of this, the filmmakers kept revisiting the final act. Different versions of the golf tournament sequence were filmed to see what worked best. Each version had slightly different comedic timing, reactions, and character focus. Some versions emphasized certain characters more than others, while others changed how key moments played out on the course. The goal was to find a balance between comedy, story closure, and energy, but that balance was not easy to achieve. Audience testing also played a role in these changes. When early cuts of the film were shown to test viewers, different reactions helped guide what needed to be adjusted. Some comedic beats worked well, while others did not land as strongly as expected. Based on this feedback, the filmmakers went back and reworked parts of the ending to improve pacing and humor. During this process, certain character outcomes were also changed late in production. This means that some characters' final moments or arcs were not fully decided until after several versions had already been filmed. Adjustments were made to improve clarity and entertainment value, even if it meant altering earlier plans for how things would end. Once filming was complete, the editing process became very important in shaping the final tone. Editors had to take multiple versions of scenes and decide how to combine them into one final sequence. Because there were so many different takes and variations, the editing room became where the true structure of the ending was created. The final result is a golf tournament sequence that feels energetic, unpredictable, and slightly chaotic. That tone was not accidental. It came from the fact that the ending was built from many different versions, adjustments, and creative choices made throughout production. If you enjoyed these behind-the-scenes facts, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more videos on classic movies you thought you already knew.